All right, so that was the first Chinese reaction in the immediate aftermath of US President Donald Trump announcing the higher trade tariffs. But Chinese President Xi Jinping has now promised to open the country's economy and also lower the import tariffs on products, including cars. Now, Xi's speech comes amidst the rising trade tensions between China and the United States. Xi has also said that China would raise the foreign ownership limit in the automobile sector as soon as possible. He's also vowed to push previously announced measures to open the financial sector. Xi has also said that China will take measures to sharply widen the market access for foreign investors. China would also speed up the opening of its insurance sector to foreign investors. Now, Xi was, of course, speaking at the four-day event themed An Open and Innovative Asia for a World of Greater Prosperity that is being held in the southern Chinese island province of Hainan. As many as 2,000 guests from over 60 different nations and regions are attending the conference, along with those from more than 100 of the world's top 500 companies. All right, now to discuss more on this, we are now joined in by Seth Friedman from San Francisco. Mr. Friedman, let me begin by asking you this. Now, in the last few weeks, in the immediate aftermath of US President Donald Trump announcing those higher trade tariffs for goods that were to be imported, predominantly from China and also from the rest of the world, we saw China taking a very hard stance, a sort of a defiant stance. But now the speech by President Xi Jinping has struck a completely conciliatory note. Would the US president now think that his pressure on China to cut down on trade tariffs is actually working?
Well, I think you have to look at it one of two ways, or maybe a little bit of both. And that is whether it should be perceived as some form of reconciliation or softening by China, or whether it's China basically taking the high road and coming out with some relatively specific announcements. I will say, though, these are generalities at this point.
All right. So, but how do you see this going forward? China has said that they intend to open their economy more. They're willing to bring in foreign investment into their nation and also are willing to open up their auto market. I mean, this was almost unprecedented in the Chinese economy.
Yes, just to clarify on the automobiles part of it, it's actually the percentage of foreign ownership, right, as opposed to exporting cars. The fact is, in China, there are already joint ventures and so forth with U.S. manufacturers. This is exactly what Trump was complaining about, and I must say, he's come out. President Xi has come out quicker, but again, we have to remember this conference in China is equivalent to the Davos of Asia, and like Davos, we do hear quite a lot of policy announcements and then quite a lot of lag time before there's real implementation.
All right. Do you think that these are just words and the implementation process will, of course, take a long time and in the immediate near future may not have an impact on the tariff trade war that is going on between the U.S. and China?
Well, it's really a misnomer that we have a trade war because all of the things that Trump came out with are held at abeyance for 60 days. All right. For purposes to allow discussion. So I would imagine that these announcements from China today may change the tone of the discussion because now there's a clearer indication about what China might be willing to do.
And also, Mr. Freeman, how do you see this progressing forward? I mean, have we reached a stage where the United States perhaps has got what it wanted and China has also now said that, look, we'll open our economy more, we'll reduce the tariffs, and we also expect, the other nations to also reduce their tariffs and thereby take away the very premise on basis of which Donald Trump wanted to go on this trade war?
Well, this is a very important point. This could be interpreted as China exercising its power to be the first ones to indicate some concessions to the U.S. Rather than a sign of weakness. I think it's also important to understand that this news is coming out at a time where satellite imagery and so forth has indicated that the Chinese have installed military equipment in the South Sea Islands. Right. And so this could possibly be an effort to also change that narrative.
All right, that's an interesting aspect of what you've just pointed out. And also, lastly, before I let you go, one of the big sticking points with the United States has had with China is, of course, the manner in which the intellectual property rights of the US companies are in fact treated in China. Do you see any substantial change taking place on that front?
Boy, you know, that is so technical, and the registration of IP in China is much more complicated than here in the United States. It's more difficult. There have been a couple very important, very critical and critically important rulings recently, favorable rulings in terms of protecting IP, but there's, you know, frankly, abusing IP rights has been a competitive advantage for China for a long time.
All right.
And it's very difficult to make changes in such a big and complex country.